This is State Senator Ed Kennedy, and I want to welcome you today to the third edition of Beacon Hill Buzz. And my guest today is Bill Alpine, who is the Director of the Department of Family and Medical Leave. Bill, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Senator.
And I guess probably the best way to start would be to have you just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Graduate of Massachusetts Maritime Academy, degree in marine engineering, and worked for as an engineer for the Commonwealth for a few years. While I was doing that, I went to Suffolk Law School at night and migrated into the environmental insurance side of things for the Commonwealth, started a program there. Took a little bit of a hiatus from the Commonwealth for about 13 years, worked in the private sector as a corporate counsel, and came back to this position this past February.
Okay. And the Department of Family and Medical Leave is a new department that was just created last year, I think, as part of a multi-component legislation that included family and medical leave. It included minimum wage, raising the minimum wage over a period of time, and also I think sales tax holidays as well.
That's correct. It was part of the grand bargain that was passed last summer. The department was created at that time. And just beginning in February, I was the first hire of the program, and since that time we have about 5 employees right now. So we're slowly growing. We're just starting to get the program underway.
Okay, and so could you tell us exactly what the Department of Family and Medical Leave will do?
It's basically a wage replacement program for employees of the Commonwealth. If they need to take a leave, whether it be family or medical, they can get up to 12 weeks for bonding with a child, up to 20 weeks for their own medical condition, up to 26 weeks for caring for a service member that's been injured in the line of duty, and they can also get 12 weeks for caring for a family member that also has a family medical issue. Those benefits don't go into effect until January 2021 for the most part. And as I said, it's basically a wage replacement program to enable employees that historically would take, let's just say, the Federal Family Medical Leave Act leave time where those weeks were unpaid. This is now allowing payment for those weeks of absence.
Okay. And so I think there are only, 7 states in the United States right now that offer this benefit to employees?
Yeah, that sounds about right. New York, California, Oregon, Rhode Island has a program. Massachusetts came into being, as I said, last summer. There's a couple of other ones that are coming into existence. Connecticut just passed legislation last week as part of their budget process, so they'll be up and running, I think, in 2021 or 22. There's a lot of states, particularly around New England, that are also contemplating similar legislation. I know Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont are all considering these types of programs.
Okay. And this is a universal program, and by that I mean it's for the private sector and the public sector as well?
For the most part it is. The federal government's not covered under our program, and the municipalities in the Commonwealth are not covered, but they can also opt in.
Okay. And at this point, I know Lowell has not opted in yet, but I do know that that the City Council considered it, I think, a couple of months ago, and it's. I think the administration is looking into whether or not it would make sense for Lowell to opt in. But is there also a minimum of employers that have a certain minimum? Do they have to opt in, or is it optional for everybody?
So unlike the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, where you have to have a minimum of 50 employees, this law applies to all employees regardless of whether you have 1 employee or 100 or more.
Okay. And the way that it's funded, and I understand that the funding formula is somewhat complicated, and so I don't really want to get into that, but it's funded with a participation by the employees and the employers. Is that correct?
Right. It's a 0.75% wage assessment on all wages. Wages that we use are the same that you would use for the unemployment insurance program. It's a fairly broad definition, but if it falls within the purview of wages, that's where the 0.75% is attached. So if an employee is making $1,000 a week, you can count on a $7.50 contribution by the employer through Mass Tax Connect, Mass DOR. And that's split roughly, if the employer avails themselves of the chargeback to the employer, about 50% each.
Okay. I think it probably will prove to be a popular program. I think that there are some companies now in Massachusetts that already offer it. I know that where my son works, he just had a child in January, and he received 12 weeks for paternity leave.
Right.
Which I think is a great thing, and it's and so has there been a lot of interest in the program? Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, there's been a lot of interest both on the employers and the employee side, and those interests are mixed. There's a lot of people that are in favor of it, and there's a lot that are not. But overall, I think it's welcomed, and we're aligning ourselves with a lot of the European countries that already offer this for their employees.
Right. In addition to the states that have already opted in with
Right.
programs. And so this, in addition to paternity leave, it's also for medical leave, right? People that have a catastrophic medical condition or something that maybe came up without, just abruptly, and so they can have time as well, right?
Right. They, if you have your own, as an employee, if you have your own medical condition, as I said earlier, you can get up to 20 weeks
Yes.
of time off. If you have a family member, and our definitions somewhat align themselves with the federal law, but we're much broader in many respects, particularly around the definition of family. It's domestic partner, it's grandparent. And so if you have a family member that has an injury or some type of medical condition, you can obtain leave for that family member.
Okay. For all of that time.
Right. In that case, it's up to 12 weeks. The caveat with that is where the remaining benefits go into effect on January 1st, 2021. The actual family leave benefit side for your family members doesn't go into effect until July 1st of 2021. That's kind of a structured, staggered deadline that's in the statute itself.
Okay. And am I correct that that your department will start collecting money, or the Commonwealth will start collecting money on October 1st, but the program will go into place or begin in January?
Right. So contributions or employee deductions, if you will begin on October 1st. So any employer that is choosing to take deductions from their employee will begin doing so on October 1st. That first quarterly return will not be due until January 31st of 2021. Excuse me, 2020.
Okay. Okay, and then you'll be off and running the rest of the way. You mentioned that you had 5 employees so far, but do you anticipate that you'll have, what do you think you'll have for employees or for a workforce when you're at full capacity?
We're studying that right now. We're doing an evaluation, and we undoubtedly are going to need more employees. Maybe through, we're trying to automate. We're trying to make a lot of the benefits process lean, and through that automation process, that's what we're looking at. There certainly will be a need for more employees as we go along, particularly on the actuarial side, probably a benefits administrator, and all of that we're looking at right now, and as time goes on, we'll be filling those slots. If I had to take a guess, it'll probably be maybe a staff of about 25 or 30.
Okay. Do you think there'll be a time when you will need regional offices, or do you expect that you'll be able to run it statewide, just centralized in Boston?
I don't know that we'll necessarily have regional offices, but we will probably work with our sister agencies. I'm in the Executive Office of Labor and Workforce Development. They have offices throughout the state. So if somebody has an appeal or someone needs specific attention, we would certainly accommodate that request through one of those field offices.
Okay. And how will the appeal process work? Go ahead.
The statute itself is pretty prescriptive as far as granting benefits. There's only so much information that we're able to obtain. For example, if you're getting medical leave, it's pretty much a doctor's note.
Yeah.
We're not really there to be peeking hard into the merits of the claim. with respect to, questioning the medical doctor's qualifications or their diagnosis. So it's probably going to be more a denial for not meeting the minimum wage requirements. Right now, the statute requires that you have minimum earnings. Approximately right now, it's $4,700, and that you also earn up to 30 times your anticipated benefit amount. That's right now where I could see that there will be appeals, whether or not it's because they haven't met the requirement themselves or there's a lag in their quarterly returns and we just can't capture it. We're going to be looking at everything at the employee level, from a Social Security level, to determine whether or not those wages have been met, and we're relying on the Department of Revenue, who is collecting the money, to make the determination that in fact those wages have been met.
Okay. So that if you have an appeal, is it the Department of Revenue that actually makes that determination?
No, all the appeals themselves, if they involve around benefits, will come right to my office. We're putting together a claims adjudication staff right now. I have a waiver and exemptions manager. She's working on not only the waiver and the claim side for appeals, but also our exemptions for private plans that employers may seek in the alternative. But those appeals will come to us. And again, as I said, right now, it's probably going to be on the financial eligibility side of things. There's possible scenarios where, we start getting into who is a family member, whether or not a doctor from some other state or country issued a determination for that family member. And again, we're trying to determine what our latitude is right now, and that's part of our whole claims process that we're working towards over the next 18 months. Right now, as you're probably aware, we've been working heavily on getting the messaging out for contributions, but we now know that has been delayed by 3 months.
Yes.
And so we're definitely, we have an eye towards what we need. We're talking to other states that have similar programs or what type of functionalities they have in their programs. And we anticipate that there's a lot to come out of this program in the next 6 to 8 months as far as that.
Okay. And what was the reason for the delay? I think you were originally supposed to start up in July 1, and so you delayed till October 1st, and I think that was with legislative approval, or maybe initiated by the state legislature. But what was the main reason for that?
As far as I know, it was probably messaging that employers were not completely aware of the program at the time. We've done a lot of messaging. We continue to do a lot of messaging, but I guess the messages that we got were that the employers may have not been ready for it. There was also some issue with the private plan opt-out, that there's not any insurance carriers, or there are very few insurance carriers that actually have alternative programs. So it was basically allowing a catch up from a messaging standpoint.
Okay. And so if there's an employer that, say, employs about 100 people, would they be able to have somebody from your office come and explain the program to them and to their employees? So
we've been doing outreach in many forms, obviously through our website, and I guess I'll take this opportunity to say that it's mass.gov/DFML. We have a pretty encompassing website. You can see, if you're an employee, how much is going to be taken out of your wages. If you're also an employee, you can see what your estimated benefits are going to be in 2021. So with that, we have links that if you go to our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. Whenever we update our website, we then do an email blast to all of those that have signed up. I think right now we have about 3,000 people that have signed up. We have been approached by a lot of organizations like the Chambers of Commerce, employers associations, and so we're doing outreach through them. And pretty much, if there's an employer or an association that would like us to come out, we'll certainly evaluate it. And if it looks like it would be worthwhile, we will take the time to go out there. We're going all over the state. I've been from Pittsfield to the Cape and back 2 or 3 times.
Okay. What about a situation where the employer that maybe employs a couple of hundred people, but they haven't informed their employees about the this benefit being available to them. How do you handle that, and how do you get the word out to employees, or how can employees find out information about this program if they're not getting that from their employer?
Right, so statutorily, the law requires that employers place a workplace poster in their work environment, wherever they have employees in the Commonwealth. We've developed that poster. We have published it in the 13 languages that are required under the statute. There's also an acknowledgement that employers have to get signed by their employees. We've also developed that in the 13 languages. We are recommending that if you have the poster has now been amended because of the deadline extension and also the rate change. We've updated that. We're advising or recommending to employers that they get that published and posted in their workforce. You know, the sooner the better. We don't really have a deadline on there, but obviously with respect to the employee's acknowledgement, we're recommending that you do that, you know, at the latest September 30th, because the next day there's going to be a potential deduction of their wages, and they should know about it at the latest at that point. So those are our recommendations that we're making, both whenever we do outreach or publishing it on our website or any other type of information that we would disseminate.
Okay. It's my understanding too that this legislation, or that the benefit covers people that get a W-2 form, but also employees who have a 1099 contractual arrangement with their employer. Are there employees that would not be eligible?
So, I'd like to touch on that 1099 issue first.
Sure, absolutely.
That certainly, that 1099 miscellaneous is probably one of the more complex issues in our statute. So in essence, if you have a workforce that's comprised of 1099 miscellaneous employees and they make up more than 50% of your workforce, then you need to treat those as if they are employees, in essence, if they are W-2. So that's kind of a big shock out there because 1099 miscellaneous employees generally get their 1099 at the end of the year, and they file a Schedule C, and they're doing it annually. So if you have a 1099 miscellaneous employee and they're above 50%, you have to take the deductions or make contributions on their behalf. You have to start doing that quarterly. Again, doesn't exist today. The other part of that is even if they do not make up 50% of your workforce, we still have to track that, so you're still going to have to count them as far as, at least on your quarterly returns. You won't have to make contributions on their behalf, but you know, we're asking that they be reported on your quarterly return. To that end, as far as employees that are not in the program or not covered by the program, our statute, which is 175M, follows the unemployment statute. It's referenced throughout our statute. It defines what wages are, and it defines what the types of covered businesses there are. So we are, in essence, following Chapter 151A, which is the unemployment statute, and particularly Section 6, which is the excluded employment. So if you work, for example, for the federal government, or you work for a real estate broker firm,
right,
where you're paid entirely on commission, or an insurance agent, or you're a religious organization, all of those are excluded types of employment under the unemployment statute, and they too will be excluded under our program. They can, allowable under the statute, to opt in if they want to.
Oh, they can?
They
Okay.
can.
So there is nobody that, so is what you're saying that just about everybody in the Commonwealth is entitled, or can get this benefit one way or another?
They have the option.
Yeah.
Majority, probably they're covered. They're automatically covered, but again, the easiest one that comes to mind is municipalities. They're not covered, but they can, and there's a specific opt-in procedure for them that we will be establishing. Right now, I'm not aware of any municipalities that have opted in. I'm not aware of any other excluded type employment entity that's opted in either. But conceivably, you can opt in if you're not covered.
Okay. I know that Lowell is at least talking about it. Whether or not they choose to opt in, I guess, will be decided a little bit later on. So we'll just have to wait and see on that, I think.
Right.
Okay. What about on the leave, maternity, paternity leave, with two parents? Would they be able to split that time? In other words, would I have to take my 12 weeks all at the same time, or would I be able to split that so that I took, say, 6 weeks, the mother took 6 weeks, then I would take another 6 weeks, and do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so the interesting aspect of the statute, and we've been asked this question numerously, both the parents could both take leave for 12 weeks at the same time, or they could stagger it. The caveat is that that leave must be used within the first 12 months of birth or adoption.
Okay.
So they could technically structure their leave around that formula.
Okay. That's an interesting point. I really hadn't thought about that. So they would be eligible for an adopted child the parents of an adopted child would be eligible for this as well.
Correct.
Okay.
And foster parents that are taking in a new foster child, that too is allowable and considered a type of leave.
Okay. There's different definitions, I think, of foster parents, and so there are social agencies that allow for foster parents. Are they eligible as well?
The agencies themselves?
Not the agencies, but foster parents that go through those agencies.
Yes.
They would be eligible for that as well.
Right, yeah.
Okay. All right. As long as the child has not reached an age of 12 months.
It's within the 12 months of taking the child either through adoption or the foster facility.
Okay.
So the child could yes, be older than a year, as long as the leave is taken during the first 12 months in which they brought that child into their home.
Okay. So for you, this must be a new adventure, right? It's a little different than what you've done in the past, but it's a brand new agency, and so it must be exciting, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's definitely keeping my mind active, sometimes awake at night, but I enjoy the challenge. My prior background, as I said earlier, was setting up an insurance type environmental cleanup fund for the state. This by far is exponentially greater in size and certainly revenue collections, but I'm happy to take on the challenge.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the employers who are unhappy with this? And do you think that for the most part it's just that they don't have a good understanding of how the program will work, or is it just another layer of bureaucracy that the Commonwealth is putting upon them, or
Well, I can only speak to what I've heard.
Yes.
And some of the feedback that we receive is that they are not, they're losing work.
Yeah.
They've trained an employee, and now that employee goes out on leave, and under this statute, they have to hold the job for that employee while they're out on leave. So some employees have expressed the fact that they have long training periods, and by the time they get an employee up and trained for that particular skill set, the employee's leave is up. Now they have to let that replacement employee go and bring the employee back. Along with that, there's a retaliation provision in the statute that if an employer does anything that could be perceived as adverse to the employee within 6 months after the employee takes leave, that's a determination of retaliation or a presumption of retaliation, and they could be subject to fines, penalties, attorney's fees, triple damages. So that's pretty much what we're hearing from the employer side of it for those that are expressing that concern.
Okay. Well, hopefully after January, when you're totally underway, people will change their attitude. I myself think that it's, I think the legislation's great, and you certainly have your challenges ahead of you, I think, on both sides of the issue, but I want to wish you all the best, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay. And that's the third edition of Beacon Hill Buzz, and we'll see you next time.